Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make modern, hard, rave techno drums. We're going to be talking about the sound like you hear in tracks by people like Viper, Diva, Aerod, the whole MolekÄll sound. You know, that very sort of like almost 90s and mid-2000s influenced techno sound, but with a very modern touch to it and very much like based on modern techno sound. Now, to go along with this video, I've just dropped a new sample pack. This is called Definitive Hard Rave Techno Drums Volume 1. And what this is you get 10 drum loops. This is what we're going to be using to show you actually today, is one of the drum loops from the pack. I have the project file that I used to make it. But you get these 10 drum loops, and you can see that they all have the individual sounds, like the individual loops of each sound inside of there, as well as the full thing. So like if you just want to grab like this rave loop, or let's say you just want the rolls from the rave loop. Or maybe you just want the full drum loop. You can see with each of these, you get the individual sounds and the full drum loop, so you can really go through and make your own loops. You know, there's infinite amounts of different combinations of these that you can put together to create new sounds. And the other thing, too, is that, you know, there aren't a lot of sample packs out there that do this. I'm pretty sure, really, like, the only other one that I've heard that really authentically captures this sound is the original Vengeance Club sounds. And, you know, nobody's really made something since then to do that. But that is the idea of this pack. You get these 10 loops, you get a ton of different sounds inside of there, so you can really get started making some powerful, hard-hitting drums in the style. And I'll play you a few of these so you can hear them. So there's just a ton of stuff to work with in there, a ton of stuff to get inspired and learn from as well. You can see how many different layers are going to go into each individual loop and really learn from it, and not just, you know, have some loops just to use for the sake of having loops, but really a useful tool to learn from and make better tracks. And with this, I also have these 10 free bonus kicks here, which are just these also nice hard-hitting, rumble, distorted kicks like this. And yeah, so you get all of this right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp. This is a really great way to support me if you guys are enjoying these videos as well. You know, I don't make a whole lot just off of YouTube, but with these sample packs and stuff, I'm able to keep going and bringing you guys new videos every day and bringing you guys new knowledge. And yeah, let's get started. So, this is loop 2 from the pack. We're at 144 BPM, which I'll talk about the BPM to start off with. So, the BPM, you know, usually you're going to want to go between like 135 and maybe 150 or 155 or something like that. Anything faster than that, and you start to kind of get into Shran's territory. But in terms of like this, like 140, 145, 144 like this, I think are really, really solid tempos because it is very fast, especially like if you just listen to the kick on its own. You know, it's pretty fast. But when you really hear like the whole groove of everything together, I find it feels very natural, even though it is very fast, you know, if you're used to like 128 BPM techno or something like that. But yeah, so, you know, you gotta get the BPM right. This isn't gonna work if you do it at a slower tempo. So, after we have that down, the first thing I think I'll show you here would be this rave loop. So this is the sound that a lot of people are wondering how to recreate. You know, these crunchy, just like super textured percussion loops like this. There's a few more of them here in the pack that I can show you. You know, it's just that. And there's a lot of different ways that you can create these. You know, a lot of times when people use these, like probably 90% of the times that you guys hear these in tracks, they're actually, you know, usually just like an old loop ripped from an older techno track. What I've done here is I've actually taken the liberty of going through and I referenced a few of these loops and I really listened to like get however many layers are going on in there. And I've gone ahead and broken it down here. So you can see there's quite a few things. So you can see like we have sort of like our main sounds like the kick and snare. And that open hi-hat. So those are just going constantly. Of course, it's not like a full kick and snare because we do have this going through some filtering. But what I always do is I like to start with those layers. Like, start with those basic layers. And then you can start going in and adding stuff. So then there's like, you know, pretty obviously like these rolls. You know, just like that super crunchy sort of sequence percussion like that. There's like another one, which is more like a 16th note sort of hi-hat thing, but this is adding a lot of texture. I think the name of the game with these is like, you're bringing in different textures, like we're bringing in like, you know, this super crunchy sounding thing. I believe this is from like a drum break or something. And then we're bringing in the texture of this, which is a little bit more rigid and like programmed sounding. And when you put those all together, that's what the sound is. Like, if I could kind of break it down to one sentence, it's a combination of a bunch of different textures from a bunch of different sources coming together to create the sound. And then there's also, like, you know, little stuff in there that I think can be easily overlooked, too. Like, for example, just having this shaker. You know, a big part of this groove is the 16th notes. Like, how you have the notes in between the kick and the main hi-hat and the snare. So, like, if I turn off the shaker, you can hear it's one little hit there, and it's something that you may not even notice if you're not really paying attention to it, but just taking out that little, you know, that little 16th note there makes a big difference, and that's really what you want to pay attention to, are like little small things like that that are going to make up a huge difference in your track. And then I have some stuff on the group here. So yeah, when you make these, you know, you don't want to just take these sounds and like kind of have them playing side by side. When you make one of these rave loops like this, like you hear in these tracks, the big part of them is the fact that they kind of have like one texture over all of the sounds. So what I mean by this is you're bringing in the textures of the individual sounds, but then you put them through some filtering and some distortion here, and even some compression with the drum bus, as you can see. And then that's what's going to kind of like give it the glue, so to speak, and make it all fit together and feel like it's, you know, like it's one loop and it's not just a bunch of different percussion. So you can see I have this drum bus here. It's not the hardest thing, but I do have a bit of compression on. So if I turn that off, you can hear the difference when we turn it on. It kind of ties it all together. And then the filtering. So we're just cutting off a bit of the high end and a bit of the low end. Here's without those. So you can hear the high-end cut with this low-pass filter here is very subtle. It just cuts off the like sharp high frequencies. It makes the loop a little tiny bit darker, so it's less like in your face and like aggressive. And it'll kind of fit more to the background of the track. And it also makes it feel a bit more lo-fi. This kind of like emulates the sound you would get if you were sampling this, where you would kind of lose some of that high end. And then we just have a high-pass filter here, which is, this is just meant to cut out the low end because obviously we don't want it to get in the way of the kick. So yeah, that's how you make those rave loops. Again, you hear these in a ton of tracks. You can just use a loop or a sample from like an old techno record or something. But if you really want to know what's going on, like how those loops that you would be theoretically ripping would be made, this is what it is. It's just careful attention to detail, bringing together a few different textures, and just making sure that you have the right level of stuff. So from there, I'd probably move forward to the kick. So then the kick in this style is usually going to be pretty simple. You know, it's that same style of just big, hard-hitting techno kick. A little bit more like, you know, a little bit less like a main room techno kick would be more of that like really deep kick. This has a bit more mid-range and highs to it, a bit more punch, because it needs to really like slam through the mix like that. And then the way that I made the rumble for this kick is actually using multi-band distortion. So I've shown this technique on this channel before. I did this for all the kicks in this pack. But what it is we have this rumble here. So we have a dry chain, just with some saturation. And then we're making our rumble basically the same way you would make a regular rumble. It's just a delay going through some distortion. But then what's happening here is this audio effect rack. Which you can see, using EQ3 here, I've split this into the highs, the mids, and then the lows here, you can see. And then what's happening is we're distorting each of them differently, and there's a bit of reverb on the highs and the mids too, just to kind of give it a bit more like crunch. I find when you put a little bit of reverb into that distortion, it can make it a bit crunchier. But this is a really great way to make these types of kicks, because typically, you know, you want something a bit more like full sounding. Like a lot of times in these tracks, it is really just the drum loop that's playing, like just the kick, and then all this different percussion that you hear. So you want your kick to be big, and you don't want it to just be taking up the low end, but to kind of have a bit of mid-range to it as well. So yeah, I really like using this amp to just distort this, and doing the multi-band distortion with EQ3 is really easy. Like all you have to do is just drop it on and then make one chain for each of the 3 bands. And then you just have to make sure, one thing I like to do is I distort it before the EQ3, because the idea is we're distorting the whole signal, but then taking just the high end of it. Or we're distorting the whole signal and taking just the mid-range. Versus if you put the amp after the EQ3, you're actually going to mess it up, because you're going to add a bunch of frequencies. They're going to make it really messy. And then the only other thing on the rumble chain there is just a compressor to side chain it a little bit to the dry kick. And then after the rumble, it's also really straightforward. You know, we just have a little bit of compression here. It's about that. You know, it just kind of brings the rumble up a bit, you know, makes it more even with the kick. And then we just have some saturation as well, which is beefing it up and really glues the rumble and the kick together. And then we just have a little bit of a low end boost. So a lot of times, I think people think when they hear these tracks that it's just the kick and then the rave loop. And while this will get you pretty close, of course, you know, this is in theory sort of like the most basic version of the idea. As you can hear, we need all this other stuff. We need like some extra hi-hats here. You can hear I just have all those playing, so those kind of like fortify the rave loop and make the hi-hats and the percussion section a bit more powerful. And you can see on that group of hi-hats, we just have some drum bus and a bit of EQ. And so stuff like, you know, there's a snare here. We're just going through some drum bus, and that is just sort of adding to what was already happening with the loop. And then we have like these extra percussions down here too. And these are just meant, again, I was saying like the 16th notes are really important in this style. You really want that like kind of rhythm. So these are just adding to that. Like if I play this with the loop. So here is the rave loop without these. And then with them. So again, like just adding a little bit of extra stuff. And then these little things that you do here and there to make the loop that much bigger are going to make a huge difference in the long term. And the other thing that we have down here is some distorted percussion, which you can hear. This is just going. So this actually only plays 3 hits every bar. We just have these different sounds going like. You know, really simple groove, all 8th notes and quarter notes. And then all that's happening is we just have some reverb and a ton of overdrive on that. But you can hear what this adds. It's kind of spacing out the beat a bit because you're getting like a lot of like very fast stuff happening, and then this thing which is happening a bit slower. And I think it really adds a lot to the groove, as well as just kind of adding like, you know, it's effects and a synth and drums at the same time. So it's just really adding a lot with something very simple. And I think this is the last thing that really brings it to life and makes it unique. If I turn this off, you know, it's pretty straightforward, but then you add this. And it just gives you that like extra little bit of flavor to the beat. And yeah, so that is it for this one, guys. That is all I have to show you. Like I said, I just want to give you some techniques and really break down what's happening in these tracks. Because I think when people hear this, it can be a bit daunting and honestly just kind of like, you know, a bit of a question as to how all these tracks are being made. This is how you make these types of drums. Again, it's all about the really fat kick, that cool kind of like old school textured techno rave loop, and then using like modern hi-hats and snares and percussion and even some extra little distorted sort of texture stuff in there to just give even more fullness to it and really tie the whole thing together. And yeah, so thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the definitive hard rave techno drum loops volume 1 right in the top of the description on my Bandcamp. It is a great pack with 10 super fire loops that you get all the individual sounds from, so you can really tear them apart, make your own loops, and really get everything. You know, I try to make this like sort of a definitive guide to this style. Like, again, there's not a lot of sample packs out there if you guys are trying to make these tracks to really nail down this type of sound. And this is a great one with 10 awesome loops plus all the individual loops. So really, like, probably millions of loops you can make out of this. Plus you get the free bonus kicks. And again, this is just a great way to support me if you guys are enjoying these videos. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.